My name is Tracey Williams-Dillard. I'm the publisher and CEO of the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder. Well, what brings me out is the fact that the community brought me out. The community brought me out because they're recognizing and remembering the death of George Floyd from 5 years back. And so we're here as the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, the oldest African-American newspaper in the state of Minnesota, to be able to have the discussion around what does that mean for our community and how do we move forward. So that's what brings me out. What I'm trying to achieve is just what we do as a paper. We inform, we inspire, and we engage. And so we're hoping that we're able to do all three of them tonight.
My name is Nekima Levy Armstrong. I'm a civil rights attorney and activist and founder of the Racial Justice Network. I'm here today in honor of the memory of George Floyd, who was killed by the Minneapolis Police Department 5 years ago. I'm grateful to the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder for hosting this event and allowing us to come together as a community to discuss the things that have happened in the past and where do we go from here.
Here today, being part of the epicenter of this event really is a reflective moment because it was such a tragic event that we all witnessed. But to be here with the leaders of the community, to those who have supported the change that we need to make, has really been a benefit to our community first, to our city second, and to the nation and world also. The purpose of being here is to support, to learn more about what we can do to keep the memory going so we don't forget, and to keep the hope alive of having a community that can come together with an equitable partnership with those who are in charge of our safety and for those in the community that can gain the respect that needs to be earned by such a communication.
We're working on making sure that we bring in people of color through the police department, that we change the behavior. I fought police cases since 1966.
Moriarty, Hennepin County Attorney. So at the time George Floyd was murdered, I was the chief public defender in Hennepin County, which is Minneapolis and its suburbs. I remember marching at the time, being out with community, trying to process what had happened. And it was actually the murder of George Floyd that prompted me to run for Hennepin County Attorney, which I am right now. I think it's having some honest, candid conversations about where we were back then and where we are now, so that people can really think about what kind of things we need to do when we leave here to try to achieve the goals we all committed to at the time George Floyd was murdered.
My name is Yohuru Williams. I'm the founding director of the Racial Justice Initiative at the University of St. Thomas. And I'm here for is a vigorous conversation about where we are and to really assess that in light of the long history of police brutality and racial inequality in our community as a whole. Often when we think about the murder of George Floyd, we think about this solely in terms of the violence that was visited on George Floyd's body. But this was always bigger than a question of police brutality. It's about housing, education, access to places of public accommodation, and the other social determinants of health that impact communities of color. So I hope our conversation will touch on all of those issues.
My name is Medaria Arradondo, and I'm here tonight to be a part of an important and timely conversation with our community, not only thinking about and reflecting on the 5-year anniversary since Mr. Floyd was killed, but how do we as a city and a community move forward? So I'm excited, I'm very honored and humbled to be here this evening.
Go right into some questions.
Sure.
Can you start by telling us why did your family decide to create the documentary and what do you hope it will accomplish?
Okay. So the documentary, when we started with the documentary, it was with everything that was taking place. Amir's uncle is a film director. And we wanted to document everything from the beginning so that we would have records for ourselves, because this was new to us. We weren't prepared for what we were up against and what we were faced with. So it was important for us to document each moment so that we were able to tell our own story, because we always have other people, and that could be in any other communities. We always have other people that tell our story. And it's not always the truth. As I always say, the truth needs no support. Once you see something that we've shown you, your eyes can't unsee it. So it was important that we showed the world in every community in this country what had taken place. So that was the main purpose for shooting the documentary.
Okay. We're going to share this for a minute.
We're going to share it. We share
Okay.
it. I need to loosen up anyway.
Me too, I get you.
Yeah.
So as you know, as we all know, 5 years ago, we witnessed the tragic murder of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department.
Yes.
Can you share what that moment was like for you and how it shaped your view of the justice and policing in the city of Minneapolis?
Several different ways to express this, but the best way that I can express it is when I first saw the footage of what took place with George Floyd, my response was, here we go again. See, because we know as Black and brown people in our communities how often those things happen that are not talked about. So my response was, here we go again, and are they gonna find a way to get away with it? But thank God for the camera phone. Thank God for the young lady that was there. Thank God for placing each of the people that were there that had a purpose that day. Thank God for showcasing what actually happens in our communities. So when I saw that, and once we started to get the information, and there was a lot of different stories that were going around, but once we were able to see the facts, once we saw the camera work, they couldn't take that. Like I said, what your eyes see can't be unseen. So I've never been the type of person or family that we say these type of things can't happen to us. It won't happen in our communities. See, I prepare my son every day. I prepare my nieces and nephews every day. Keep your hands where they can be seen. When you're riding through the neighborhood, don't ride with 2 or 3 people in the car. Don't ride with a hoodie on your head. You're not out in the suburbs. You can't do like the white kids. You can't ride the way that you want to. You can't be as free as you want to. Those are our conversations that we have all the time. So we prepared them for that. So when it happened, we'll take a moment.
And take it.
When it happened, reality set in because I couldn't teach my son how to survive while being asleep. I was able to give him everything else, but that tool that I learned as a kid growing up in the inner city of Chicago, I couldn't give him what I learned as far as being able to be aware of your surroundings while you slept. They say, let your humanity speak. You have to humanize yourself. We have to constantly humanize our children. When I tear up, I'm not tearing up because I'm scared or that I'm soft. People that know me know that it's nothing like that at all. It's just that it's happened so many times, and now that it's at our doorstep, it's nothing that I could do. I wasn't there to protect him. I would have took those bullets. I wasn't there to protect him. he never knew what happened to him. He didn't get a chance to see what took place. He left here not knowing what happened. So we have to do the best that we can. As a family, as a community, I'm doing the best that I can. I recently suffered a stroke in January. God has blessed me, He spared me. I'm still whole. I'm able to walk again. I lost my balance. In my quest and in our fight for justice, this is what happened. Because they don't even know what caused the stroke. Everything is showing that I'm completely healthy. It was caused from a blood clot in my cerebellum. I lost my balance one morning getting up for work. Thought it was just a dizzy spell. And went to wash my hands and blacked out and fell into the wall, just like that. We have to laugh to keep from crying. And we try to do that a lot. Every time that I speak about my son and that I'm faced in a situation to talk about my son, I always tell myself, boy, stop crying. Stop crying. But every single time, here I am. There it goes. There's those emotional tears. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. Let me say that. God has given me a forgiving heart. He gave the new me a forgiving heart. Because the old me had a problem. The old me was a psychopath that believed in an eye for an eye. That was the old me. But God took hold of me when this situation happened. I wasn't speaking through myself. God spoke through me. God asked for 22 days of peace. That wasn't me that asked for 22 days of peace. That wasn't Buddy that asked for 22 days of peace. That was God that spoke through me. I didn't even know where it came from. But then to look up 3 years later and we're still fighting for justice, for something that the world was able to see, and this is hard to digress. Well, this is hard to digest. You don't just, you can't just swallow this. But they expect us to. They expect this community to. They expect the leaders that want to actually do something to help us to. Everyone's hand is forced. See, but I believe in a higher power. We can say what we want to say. People believe what they want to believe. I don't knock anybody. I believe that justice will prevail. I believe that his voice will continue to be heard, not only from us, but from millions of people that are yet to hear his story. Because we're living in a time where it's only 15 minutes of fame. Everyone gets their 15-minute shot now. And that's how the stories go. It's every 15 minutes, it's a new story. A new story every 15 minutes. So they don't get a chance to focus on what actually happened because it's a new story constantly. How do we help people in the next community that's in the next state, that's in Hawaii or Wyoming? How do we help them? See, a lot of them don't have the resources that we have. They don't have people like Nekima, Levy, Armstrong. They don't have people like Tashura Garraway. They don't have people on the ground to fight for them. So we have to be the voice. Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, we have to be the voice to help people, not only in our country, but throughout the world.
So,
what's your next question?
well,
I'm sorry, I go hard.
So I know you talked a lot about a lot of the circumstances that you're dealing with right now, but I know a lot of this whole situation affected your entire family.
Yes.
So one might ask, how does your family carry the weight of this loss, and what are they doing? How can your message today maybe help other families that are suffering in the same way that you are? How are you carrying this loss?
We've always been a tight-knit family. Thankful for each of our grandparents on each side of our family, and just seeing the unity and how we all came up. Life happens. Life's. Children grow up to do what they want to do. People turn out to be the way that they want to be. Doesn't mean that they didn't have the right upbringing.
Especially not if they were asleep.
What was that?
Especially not if they were asleep. You know, they can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is tough for not only my family, but Amir's mother. See, Amir was her baby. That was her baby. That was her baby boys. We have 2 children together. Amir's was my second oldest son.
And still your baby.
And still my baby. And still my baby. So I can't say, most people when they're going through these type of situations, they always hear about what was going on with the mother, how the mother's hurting. Yeah, the father's hurting also. I'm thankful that my voice is being heard. I truly appreciate every opportunity that I have to share and express what I'm dealing with as well. This is tough for our family, but we're all on the same accord. We're looking for justice. We're looking for accountability. See, and here's the thing. What's wrong with being accountable? You already took them. You can't bring them back. What's wrong with saying, Mr. Locke, we messed up? We messed up. We made a mistake. The city made a mistake. And just own up to what has happened. There's nothing wrong with accountability. Everybody's tucking their tails. They're so afraid. What are you afraid of? You did wrong. All of these different legal loopholes. And that always leads back to the same thing. Nothing.
Well, what do you want people to know about Amir's life? Not just the circumstances to his death, but what do we need to know about Amir's life?
Amir was, and I say this all the time, he was beautiful. He was a beautiful young man. And I'm not just saying that because he was my boy. So if you had the opportunity to sit in the room with this kid, he was just so intellectual and outgoing, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do in regards to breaking generational curses on our family, teaching finances and things of that sort. He wasn't a perfect kid at all, in any way whatsoever. But he was my kid. So, and everyone has their story, and he had his own story. And he's not here to tell his story. And that's the part that makes me sick. Amir was bright. He had the opportunity, he enjoyed music. His way of reaching the youth, he started a company called Saving the Youth LLC a year prior to him passing away. And what we talked about was that he was like, Dad, I know we out here, people out here in the streets, and we're doing all of these different things. He says, but I have a plan. And I said, okay, well, what is the plan? He says, I know the type of music that I'm doing now, you don't really like it. That's what he told me. You know, y'all call it mumble rap or whatever. No, I like music, period, because that's what I come from. So I told him, I said, it's not that I don't like it, I just perfect what you're doing. So he said, I'm gonna use that to reach young people, and I'm gonna wheel them in and find out what their goals are, and I'm gonna help them reach their goals. And I said, you know what? Absolutely. You have my support 100%. A couple weeks before Amir was taken from us, I just had this eerie feeling. you know, as a parent, you just, if you know your kid, you just know. So I kept calling him because he was here visiting. Amir was born in the Twin Cities, but he ended up moving away to Dallas. So he was here visiting the family. So, and he was doing DoorDash. And he had his legal weapon that he used for protection because of everything that was going on in the Twin Cities. So, and Amir was visiting family, as I said, and just this thing, I just kept calling him and I say, hey man, do you need some help leaving? Do you need money or something? He's like, no, Dad, I'm working. I don't need money. If I need you, I'll tell you. So, and that was typical Amir. If I need you, I'll tell you. And he rarely said that he needed any help. So I just kept calling him. And I called him that week before that week before it happened. Well, the weekend before it happened. And I said, man, listen, you got to get up out of here. And he was like, Dad, I'm leaving. I'm leaving soon. I'll be leaving next week. And I said, okay. I said, I'll get off your heels. That's how we talk. I'll get off of your heels. And he said, okay. And our world was destroyed.
Well, let me ask you the next question.
Yes.
What has justice looked like for your family, and what do you still need? Because I heard you say something. Mm-hmm. What do you still need from the system and the community? Well,
justice, what does justice look like? That, you know what, that is, you know, that's like kicking a can. So, you know, that's, and thank you for the question, but it's almost like a slap in the face. You know, justice is sitting right in front of us. The leaders that can get things done. People not being afraid to step up and do the jobs that they've been elected to do. Not to put any pressure on the people that are here. These are great people. But that's what justice looks like. Do your job. Just do your job. I don't believe in defunding the police department. That's not my stance. We need the police. If anything happened in our communities, those are the first people that we're calling. We need help. We want help. But there's nothing wrong with accountability. If you step outside of that badge and you take the law into your hands, into your own hands, and you make a mistake, because mistakes can be made, and you make a mistake, just accept your responsibility. They want all of us to, as civilians. That's the first thing they tell us in court. Will you accept responsibility?
Yeah.
And then they give us more time. So that's what justice looks like. It looks like the people that are sitting right in front of you that can actually do something about it.
Well, how do you keep the strength to keep the advocacy going for your son and for others like him?
I keep the strength by being able to look at those that have been out here before this was ever my fight. When I can look back at Nekima Levy Armstrong, when I can look at Nekima, when I can look at Tashir Garraway, when I can look at all of the freedom fighters, like Spike Moss, when I can look at all of the freedom fighters, and it's too many to name, so don't feel bad if I don't mention your name. It's just that I can only think about so much at this time, so don't take it personal. You know how some people are. He didn't say my name. So don't feel that way, because we see everyone. I just can't remember everybody at this time. But I extend the same olive branch to you. So these freedom fighters that have already been out here doing it, that's how I stay strong. That's how I do this. And I have to tell you, I'm tired of my voice crackling, and my voice don't crackle all the time, just every now and then. And this is another one of those moments. And I used to be embarrassed that people could see me in a vulnerable stage. Mm-hmm. I always saw that as I used to see it as a sign of weakness. But I've now learned that it's a sign of strength. So it's a sign of strength, and that's how I keep going, by looking at everyone else that has been the vocal point of this fight.
My turn.
Your turn.
Okay, well, every time when I do something, it always feels like time goes so fast.
Yes.
And sitting here at the Fireside chat talking to you has been my privilege, and our privilege here just to hear that you to take the time to share your family's story and to show your strength. I was going to say vulnerability, but your strength.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
By introducing Nekima, so she may not need any introduction. It seems like everybody pretty much knows her, but Nekima Levy Pound, Armstrong, civil rights attorney and founder of Racial Justice Network. People were on the front line in the days following George Floyd murder, protesting, organizing, and holding leaders to account. As a longtime civil rights attorney and advocate, she has been a relentless force for systematic change. Medaria, otherwise known as Arradondo, on the other end of the table, Arradondo, he is a former Minneapolis police chief, and he's the CEO of Optimist Solely Consulting. Did I say that right? Okay. Rondo made history as Minneapolis' first Black police chief and was in a leadership position when George Floyd was murdered. His decision to speak out and testify against their children marked a significant break for Minneapolis silence, for Minneapolis police silence, and sparked national conversations around reform. Thank you. Yeah, and see you. Mary Moriarty, Hennepin County Attorney. As a Hennepin County Attorney, Mary leads the very office that was central to prosecuting those involved in George Floyd's murder. Her role is pivotal in shaping what accountability and justice looks like in this community today. So thank you, Mary. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Yohuru. And I practice these things, not really. But I gotta tell you guys, I can't even tell you my staff's name right. And they deal with me for over a year. So this is a problem I just have. So please forgive my heart, but I mean, okay? So Dr. Yohuru has been a guiding voice in contextualizing George Floyd characters in the broad scope of American history. Through his scholarship and activism, he challenges us to not only remember, but to act with purpose. So thank you so much. And he's a professor at the University of St. Thomas, and he is the founder of the Racial Justice Initiative. Yeah. So here we are discussing where do we go from here 5 years later. And so I'm going to open this question up to all of you, but I'm going to also let you know that I got my mic back. So I'm going to have to stop you at 2-minute time. Okay, so just know we want to give some conversation, and we got a lot of questions here, so we can get as close and be precise with our answers. That's helpful. So one speaker, one mic per 2 people. So the first one, we're going to start off right here with, where were you when you first heard the news about George Floyd, and what was your immediate reaction? And you can start. You want to start? On May 25th of 2020, I remember being at home, normal Memorial Day, and being tagged in a Facebook post. Happened to look at the Facebook post. The post was written by Ashley Quinones, whose husband, Ryan Quinones, had been killed by the Richfield and Ida police departments. And she had become an activist at that point. So she tagged me and several others, saying that the Minneapolis Police Department had killed someone that day. by choking them or crushing their throat. When I first read that, I was thinking, how come we haven't heard anything about this? So I did a Google search, looked online, there was nothing there. So I picked up the phone and did call Chief Arradondo. And then he answered. And after he answered the phone, I said, Rondo, did Minneapolis Police Department kill someone today? And he said, no, Miss Nekima, they didn't kill anyone today, but someone died as a result of a medical incident. That's what his cops had told him. And I said, have you seen video of the incident? And he said, no. I said, you need to see some video immediately because the community is saying that a man's throat was crushed or he was choked to death. And after that point, and Chief Arradondo said that he had already turned the case over to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And from that point, we had sent Eli Darris, who was working for the ACLU, to the scene. And witnesses on the scene told him that MPD had deliberately killed someone. So from there, I went to Facebook, let people know something happened. This is what Ashley said. This is what the chief said. Now we need to see some video. The next Facebook post I was tagged in was a video by Darnella Frazier showing the horrific murder of George Floyd. I just had tears streaming down my face at that point. And I picked the phone back up and I called Rondo again. And literally said they killed that man. And I'll stop there. That's what I experienced.
Well, how about Rondo? Seems like that's a way for you.
So the first call I got was May 25th, 2020. It was about 8 p.m., 8:30 p.m. And I received a call from one of my deputy chiefs who had said that officers had responded to 30th Chicago on a alleged counterfeit situation in the corner. And while dealing with the individual there, at this time I don't know, it's Mr. Floyd, but in dealing with the individual, there was some medical emergency and he was being transported to HCMC, but they don't believe he is going to make it. And so at that point, there's a protocol that goes into play. I was at home at the time. I immediately went into City Hall, my office, and there's a processes and notifications that take place. And everyone had left City Hall at that time, but about midnight, I get a call from Miss Nekima. And she asked me, Rondo, have you seen, or did any of your officers kill a man this evening at 30th Chicago? And again, I just knew that there was a medical emergency, a person had been deceased, and I shared that with her. And I could tell in her voice, and if you ever know Miss Nekima, when you're going to get a call back, she was not, there was something inquisitive about my response to her. And she says, I'm going to call you back. And she called me back, it's a little bit after midnight, and she says, have you seen the video of your officers killing the man at 30th in Chicago? And I said, I have not. And then she sent me what is now the video of the courageous Miss Darnell Frazier that the world knows. And so that's the first time that I had heard about his killing.
Okay, Mary. You were where what happened?
Yeah, I was chief public defender at the time, and I remember opening up Facebook and I saw a bunch of messages about MPD killed somebody. And I started looking at the video, and I thought I was looking at the wrong video because I saw this man face first on the ground who was under control. And I kept thinking I had the wrong video because I couldn't imagine what happened. When I realized what happened, I remember thinking and telling people, this is going to be our Ferguson. That's what I thought at the time.
Old thing. I thought I'd take a little bit of a slightly different take. It's funny, Tavis finally talked about the King question, where we go from here, but what he left out is that the continuation of the title of that book is Chaos or Community. And for me, I remember the first time I saw the video, which was the following day, thinking to myself back to the cover of Life magazine from 1967, 12-year-old Joe Bash Jr. shotgun by the National Guard. And the title being Shooting War in the Streets, Unpredictable Insurrection. My thought in that moment, seeing that video, having moved here shortly after the killing, moving here in 2017 with my son, and perhaps of all these wonderful, beautiful signs in Minnesota that said, we believe in life, Black Lives Matter, science matters, so on and so forth. And at that moment, planning to leave University of St. Thomas to go to St. John's University, thinking to myself, I escaped. Because this is predictable. We didn't know this was going to happen yet. Certainly we knew this was going to happen yet because it's not the predictable insurrection. This is the echo. History doesn't repeat itself, it echoes. And the reality is that when we think about this in the context of a Joe Bash Jr., or in the long train of killings in our community, documented by people like Elder Spike Moss, that are tattooed on the memory of so many people who live in this community, who understand from the standpoint not simply the latest, but also finally in the case of Darnell Frazier, some documentable evidence that was irrefutable. It wasn't like the picture of Randy Sample being dragged down the street. Some of y'all will remember this in the 1970s. That was the first time we had a viral movement in Minnesota where they captured a 12-year-old boy being dragged down the street by the Minneapolis police. A Star Tribune reporter had captured it, and it was on the cover of Newsweek, and people said, what is this liberal city, and what is this? And Black folks in town said, you don't know the half. So what I thought then, and what I feel now, particularly in the aftermath of the pronouncement from the Trump administration of trying to move away from the consent decree, is where to go from here, but don't forget the single part, chaos community. We have to choose, in other words, Nekima, Levy Armstrong, community. But it's going to be a real hard choice.
So you talk about community and what happened, right after. So remembering more vividly about the days that followed George Floyd's murder, either in the streets, in your workplace, or in your home. What are you reading? Here's them. The worst victims. And you were stop.
I'll be quick. I remember my first memory as a young African-American girl on the news in the pouring rain, asking the question, why do they continue to kill us? That still sits on, I still have that video on my cell phone. I can watch that to this day and it brings me back to that moment. I think it's very easy. I love the poem, Sister, that you share. For us to think about this is from the violence visited on men. But the reality is that women are invisible victims in this. They're both victims of police brutality. But then who's left to shoulder the burden of our community and of families broken and destroyed by police violence? There's so much pushback at sexism, noir. Gets women of color who have to be so strong in the face of insurmountable violence in our community that comes from all different quarters. And I remember that young girl and thinking to myself, she'll now grow up to carry that burden and to worry. In the same way that I love Amir Locke's father speaking as a father in that way, that men experience that too. But the reality is that women carry that burden doubly, and Black women know it intimately. And that's why we need to lean in and listen to what Black women have to share about this.
You better stay there.
So I mentioned I was chief public defender at the time, and I was a public defender for 30 years. And so as head of that office, we were grappling with, we all know about police brutality. We've been hearing about it forever, but it was really the video that allowed other people to understand what actually happened. And I think what I remember from back then, I was marching in the streets, and I remember a lot of white people talking about Black Lives Matter and really making these commitments about how this could never happen. And I thought at the time, this may be an opportunity for racial reckoning. I'll say now that never happened, and I think we're going backwards. But that's what I thought at the time. Sadly, comes.
So in literally the hours and days after Mr. Floyd was killed, I've got this other lens that I'm kind of looking at things from and I'm dealing with. So one is there is no sleep. I'm constantly in communication with our community leaders. It was very important for me, particularly after the initial false statement about a medical death. It was important for me to now make sure that I'm talking directly to our community leaders and making sure that I'm giving them the communication and the messaging that's accurate. I'm also dealing with the fact that watching what the temperature is going to be in the city, we're also dealing in a pandemic. Many of us forget what that was like and the dynamics of that, and folks out in the summertime, it's hot. Unfortunately, we saw an increase in violent crime during that time. And then as well, we've got people who are grieving, they're in pain, and there's many different things that are going on in the city. But I remember the initial hours and the first days, it's really meeting with, I'm in backyards, I'm calling folks, I'm constantly trying to make sure, because at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that whatever the reaction is, that we keep our city safe, our community safe, we're looking after our children. So that's what I remember in the initial hours and a few days right after.
After seeing the video and recognizing that essentially a lynching had occurred, so then I don't know, I probably just blanked on, in terms of, I feel like I'm like going back in time, even as I'm talking to you all, thinking about the trauma because of the look in Derek Chauvin's eyes. Right? This wasn't the situation where normally said an officer feared for their safety, they had to make a split-second decision. How often do we hear that when deadly force is used against a person? But in this instance, it was like we were looking at a demon and looking at us through the camera with his knee on a black man's neck. Oh my God, it's very nice. Just, it's still traumatizing. Right. But after that, I had to shift into activist mode. Now, we had already been outside, right? Because it was a pandemic, but we had been collecting masks from people in the community who were sewers. We had started going out the first weekend in April, right, King Demetrius? Walking to the Code Foods in North Minneapolis and handing out masks every Saturday. So we had already put ourselves out there. So after this happened, I'm like, it's a pandemic, but we gotta go in the streets. So I reached out to a woman named Jess Sundin. She is a white woman who is part of Twin Cities Coalition for Justice. And we need to plan the first protest. So in the middle of the night, she and I were on the phone, putting the event page together and making the decision that we were going to take to the streets within the hours after George Floyd was killed. In the meantime, as Chief Arradondo said, he had reached out to Black community leaders. Yeah. We all went to City Hall and we shared our frustrations and concerns. And some of those people are in this room, some of the elders who were present, some of the young folks as well. And I just remember Chief Arradondo saying, I'm going to go and deliberate about what to do. And he said, when I come out of deliberation, we're basically going to go into a press conference and I'm going to announce my decision of what to do about the 4 officers who killed George Floyd. So we didn't know what the chief was going to do, because typically in Minneapolis, when police kill someone, there's a cover-up. Right? The media is used to manipulate the narrative. They dig into the background of the victim. The officer can have 30 incidents of police misconduct. That person got a traffic ticket. Suddenly they deserve to die. So in that instance, we didn't know what the chief was going to do. But when he emerged from deliberating, he went to the microphone and said, I am going to fire all 4 officers involved in killing George Floyd. Yes, you know? And that was an important moment to send a message that because usually they say, just wait for no, we saw the video. What are we waiting for?
Right.
So he took that step, and then after that, we began saying almost immediately in the press conference, thank you, Chief, for firing them. Now they need to be charged and arrested for what they did. So for many of us who are in this room, I see faces who were out in the streets. That's what I remember. Us taking to the streets with our masks on, putting our bodies on the line to stand up for justice for George Floyd and all the stolen lives. Who came before George Floyd who did not receive justice? Jamar Clark, Orlando Castillo, say their names. The list goes on and on and on. But the fact that the people took to the streets, put their bodies on the line and their lives on the line to stand up and to refuse to be refused, that's what I remember in the aftermath of George Floyd being killed.
Well, as yet, what conditions, social, political, and historical, did they set the stage for the murder of George Floyd to happen in broad daylight in the city of Minneapolis? I mean, it's been happening.
So I think from my perspective, and I know we have many of our elders in the room today. We have many of the elders in the room today, and so knowing the history is very important. And when we think about some of the toxic culture that exists within that system that's been in place for 160 years, that allowed that indifference that showed up at 30th in Chicago that night, that's a part of it, part of that system, part of that history. And the other thing I think is just a combination of oftentimes communities, we accept that this is just the way it has to be. And I will say that one of the things that when I saw the video for the first time, but the other thing that I noticed about the video, besides the inhumanity that was shown Mr. Floyd, was we had community members within feet of him pleading for those officers to do something. And their pleas went unanswered. And it was almost, I remember this now, when I see them at the curb, it was almost like there was this invisible force field that would not allow them to, and by the way, they did not have to. The officers should have not been doing that, and they should have rendered him that care. But it's, I think that's over history that we just, that we can't challenge the system. We can't hold people accountable. And so I think that's a part of the combination. That's a part of that. But there's other things, again, the history, what we have experienced as a community over the years. And so those are just some of the things that I recall in terms of some of the social pieces to that.
I would say lack of accountability. And the idea that police, and I'm just going to say this name. I've been thinking a lot about this. And I'm going to say the name Davis Maturi. Right? It's time, come on. So I'm mentioning him because he's a Black member of our community who is living next to someone who was harassing him and his wife, had been harassing the neighbors of color before they moved in there, so a white man, and had been harassing other neighbors around there. So you may recall Mr. Maturi was shot in the back by his neighbor. And when that case got submitted to our office, we discovered that Mr. Maturi had been calling MPD over and over. He had been threatened with a gun and with a knife in separate incidents, and MPD did not submit those cases to us for charging. When they submitted the cases, we charged, and we were told by MPD that they would not go arrest him. Okay? They told us, the county attorney's office, we are not going to go arrest this person who shot Davis Maturi in the back. Then what we saw was a press conference by the chief who blamed Mr. Maturi for getting himself shot. For actually having a press conference and blaming the victim, the black victim, for having been shot by his neighbor when he was standing on his own lawn. So I had a lot of sleepless nights there. I mean, our office filed a red flag extreme risk protection order against Sawchuk because we wanted somebody to go out there and take his guns away. We couldn't get law enforcement to do that. They refused. And I was afraid that Sawchuk was going to take a shot at somebody else or a child or come out of the house and kill somebody. So do you know what I, as county attorney, did? I called city council members and I said, please help. We cannot convince the Minneapolis Police Department to go arrest a man who shot out his window and shot a black man in the back. Wow. And I said, please help. And so the council then sent, if you remember this, sent out a letter, had a press conference, or I think it was Koski, who was running for mayor at the time, blasted the mayor and the police chief, and only after that did the police go arrest Sawchuk. I say that to you because when I marched in the streets after George Floyd, I thought I was marching in the streets, and I actually ran for county attorney in large part because of what happened to George Floyd. So I think it's important to understand when we're thinking about where do we go, where are we now? And the reason I told the Davis Maturi story is because it's important to understand where the Minneapolis Police Department is right now. Right. And so the Maturi, it's an ongoing case right now. But what I think people are up against is that, when the chief shows up at a press conference and blames Mr. Maturi for being shot, there's not a lot of accountability for that, right? And the press doesn't make it a big story, and nobody really says, what are you doing? Why didn't you do this? Another case that's kind of ongoing that kind of tells us a little bit about what's going on with MPD is the Allison Lucier case. So I just want to touch on that because the Minnesota Department of Human Rights report in the consent decree talks about a history with the Minneapolis Police Department of discrimination against Black and Indigenous people. So Allison Lucier was an Indigenous woman. She was the victim of domestic violence several days before she was found deceased in her home. The Minneapolis Police Department showed up there and saw needles, and they decided that she died of an overdose. They did not call the crime lab. They did not appoint an investigator until several days later. To this day, the chief says that she died of an overdose. Even though the medical examiner has said, and it is on the death certificate, that she died of a subdural hematoma. So I just bring up those two cases to give you examples of the issues are still there. I'll just speak for myself. When I was out marching in the streets 5 years ago, I wanted a world where this didn't happen, yet it continues to happen today. And so I think it's important to understand that's where we are today.
Yeah.
I just saw this selection and some things that Mary shared. I want to take you back to 1975. Spike Moss remembers this. There was a woman by the name of Willie Mae Gibbons who was assaulted by the Minneapolis police. They'd actually injured her neck and put her in the hospital for 8 days. When they went to her house with a no-knock and looking for her son, Gregory Jennings, and he was in Stillwater prison. And they assaulted the family because they couldn't find Gregory. This woman, who had been a paragon in the community and activist, was injured. She actually sued the police and wanted judgment the following year, but it didn't matter because in that moment, her family was harmed. But Arthur Cunningham, who was the president of the NAACP in that moment, made national headlines for declaring that the Minneapolis police had upholding him had declared war on blacks and Indians. Arthur Cunningham makes national headlines for that in that moment, but the reality is that's in the history of the department. She Arradondo spoke to that. Since 1867, the Serve and Protect the Minneapolis police has been about controlling black and brown bodies. And when non-Minneapolis sings the Black Mass of Let There Be Voice, people sing that song and never interrogate the lyrics. There was a dark past and there's a whole present, right? The future is unknown. We have to invest in the future. But I want to be clear in saying that when people don't know their history, they make assumptions about what was, and then they erase or forget those incremental moments where the possibility for change is there. We have a blueprint for how we can move forward. And I'll put some lights on that by talking about, people said, well, this is the first time that a Minneapolis police officers had successfully tried police brutality. Actually, the first time that happened was in 1899. October 26, 1899, there was a black woman named Celia Rice living on Lake Street. She sent her daughter in church, and her daughter was trying to go home, and they asked a neighbor if they could take some firewood with them to home. And a police officer by the name of Thomas Brake, see, I got receipts, stops the girls and demands to know when they got the wood. See, the stuff that we talk about in our contemporary moment, they have long echoes. And when the girls say, you have no right to stop us, and my mom said, get the wood, and the neighbor said that we could have the wood by the business, Thomas Brake is offended, and so he proceeds to take these two brothers in custody. But they have to pass Ophelia Rice's home in order for him to get up to the station. So when he gets to the home, Ophelia Rice comes out and says, I demand somebody got my daughter in custody. What has she done? And Officer Britt says, mind your business, go back in the house. And Mama Rice says, no, no shot. Not Minneapolis. And they happen to live adjacent to an alderman who comes out just in time to see Thomas Brake get off his horse and out of seats. And begins to assault Ophelia Rice, demanding that he let her daughter go. Thomas Brake injured her neck so severely that the alderman says to him, let her go. I'll make sure she gets to the station tomorrow. But you injure her. Thomas Brake said, no, protocol says we got to take her in. He goes, no. I will take accountability for what's happening now, but you let her go now. The next day, when he brings Miss Rice down, they swear out a complaint against Thomas Brake. It took 2 years, 2 failed trials, but finally, in 1900, they got a judgment of $15 against Thomas Brake for the assault on Ophelia Rice. Now, why do I tell you that story? I want to be clear. Number one, because Ophelia Rice, Willie Mae Dippings, insert name here, when we're talking about black people in this community, they know that pain intimate because we have been experiencing this for generations. Number two, the official misconduct, the erasure comes when we forget those early struggles, and we then say, well, this is the first time, instead of doing the work of saying, no, instead of focusing on whether it's the first time, we need to pour our energy and try to figure out how this could be the last time. And it can't be the last time, or by saying this, unless we then understand the ways when police brutality is tip and steer. The most compelling witness at the show up in trial to me was Alicia Orton, the young woman who worked in the service station across from Cup Foods, who said, among other things, when she was pressed, as people were skewering her on social media for her inability to speak the Queen's English. And she said, I went to Minnesota for a better education, and I ain't doing a regular work at the service station. And she said, and I'm quoting her, I'll try not to cuss. And all the things that people deal with at 38 shop, the worst of it is when the police come, try to cuss, mess up people. Because she's doing a regular work at in the grocery store to try just too much for basic necessities. She doesn't have access to health care. We got this beautiful system now. Get this great phone today. Let me go back to Gilstad here. I rather than bit my sister now with white ears bloom, her face nods beginning to slow. Because you really want to understand systemic racism, don't let a health crisis happen to you, because that'll be the moment where you are pushed over the edge. Oh, by the way, that was a big part of what happened at George Floyd Square as well. It's housing, it's education, it's access to places of public accommodation. It is employment, it's unfair labor practices. And who enforces all that, unfortunately, in our community? When you've got a problem with the electric company, when there's a dispute about a supposed $25 bill, when you've got parking fees that up, the hammer comes, the police, and then they're charged with the responsibility of navigating that, because we have a model of policing and not a model of public safety. That's a historical fact. That's how we measure structural injustice. And if people knew the history, we'd be in a much better position to understand why the war on blacks and Indians continues.
Yeah, right. So, it didn't. I think you might have answered this question, but how has institutional indifference to black being shaped policing, housing, healthcare, education, and that can play a good. Institutional indifference to black pain, it's how we got here. And the reality is that since black people arrived here, they've been dealing with institutional indifference. When I studied the Dred Scott case in law school, I wasn't familiar with Minnesota. And when we learned about it, we kind of glossed over the facts and information. But after living here, it gives me a whole different picture of what happened historically. And for those who may not know the history, Dred Scott was brought here by his so-called master, lived at Fort Snelling, got married, and then when his so-called master was ready to leave Minnesota, Dred Scott said, I lived as a free man. I should not be forced back into slavery. And he wound up suing. And one of the interesting things about that suit was not only was he denied his right to freedom, but the chief judge, Roger B. Tye, who came from a slaveholding family, said in that decision, the black man has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. That's the whole thing right there. That's the whole foundation. The Supreme Court jurisprudence saying that the black man has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. When I think back to Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck, that Supreme Court jurisprudence comes back and the black man has no rights. He didn't have the right to breathe. Yeah. He didn't have the right to get a citation and deal with the matter in court. He didn't have a right to raise his baby girl, Gianna. He didn't have the right to live like a free man. And the interesting thing about that history as well is that the reason that Dred Scott was able to come over here and live the way that he lived was because Minnesota made it comfortable for slave owners to come and vacation here. Right? So talking out of both sides of their mouths as a state, on the one hand, this oasis of progressivism, a land of opportunity. We're the best of the best, right? Minnesota's number one in a lot of categories nationally. But then you look at the flip side of that, and you see that we continue to have some of the worst racial disparities in the country. Whether it's looking at education, whether it's looking at the criminalization of black folks, whether it's looking at the black home ownership rate, whether it's looking at the black unemployment rate, whether it's looking at the median household income for black families and how disparate it is in comparison to white families, right? That is the reality that set the types of conditions that led to